Hello everyone, my name's Edward Hawkins and instead of sitting here in sunny Littlehampton, I had hoped to be working for English Touring Opera this spring. I was due to perform the role of Aquila in Giulio Cesare and then do a show as Don Alfonso in Così fan tutte, but alas, it wasn't to be. English Touring Opera have been amazing in terms of honouring our contracts financially, and as a result of that, we have been eager to collaborate with them in their project of putting together these singing lessons. This is singing lesson number 5 for adults. There are also singing lessons for children, which you might want to have a look for on the website or online. Now, the one preceding mine, and I recommend you look at all the others, set me some homework. It was done by Frederick, and he's fantastic at getting his text out when he's singing, and I was so pleased that he shared some of his tactics for doing that. And he talked about really energizing the consonants, making the consonants your friends instead of seeing them as obstructions to the musical line. And he suggested that we try and work on it with a phrase that we're currently working on in our own music. So let's see if I can do that on something I'm working on. So the phrase I think I'm going to use from my own repertoire I'm working on is the first phrase of Oasis und Osiris, which is Sarastro's aria from The Magic Flute. It's very well known, especially among basses. It's very slow and stately and majestic, and very easy to be very boring if you're not careful. So I'll sing it the problematic way, the boring way, and then I'll see if I can get Freddie's idea of the homework to energize the consonants and give more direction to the phrase. So, first of all, O Isis und Osiris schenket der Weisheit Geist im neuen Paar. So, not too bad, bit blocky, like I say, not much direction to it. So now I'll try and do what Freddie suggests and energize those consonants, see if it makes a difference. So, O Isis und Osiris schenket der Weisheit Geist dem neuen Paar. I feel like when I am doing it that way that I am thinking more as a sentence. It's almost like I'm not trying to really smash out loads of energized consonants. It's just that that advice from that homework makes me think of a complete thought, and therefore my musicality becomes less labored and a bit more realistic. I'm actually singing something that someone wants to say instead of just a bunch of syllables all strung together. So thanks, Freddie, that was great advice. So what I'd like to do with you in this session is to talk a little bit about, firstly, posture. You can't tell because I'm sitting down, but I'm 6'8" tall, and posture is something I have to work on a lot, just in everyday life. But also, when I'm singing, I've found that if I don't take the time to check in with my posture, I am often unnecessarily tinkering with my sound and my technique to try and solve something which is postural in nature. So we're going to do a few exercises to try and make sure your whole body is aligned when you're trying to sing. Then we'll move on to trying to talk about finding as a result of that, a really nice connected feeling, a column of sound, if you will, all the way down to the low support muscles, right down into the pelvic floor. And then as a result of that, talk about the freedom that should give here and here. So let's start with a few posture exercises. So try and find a space where you can stand up and then have a go along with me. So first of all, here's a quick analogy that you can use to try and think about the angle and the tilt of your pelvis, which has a huge impact on your ability to sing because it can get in the way of you using these lower muscles. I'll show you what I mean. Basically, the idea is that if you imagine your pelvis is a bucket full to the brim with water. So I have a natural tendency to stand like this. It's called being sway backed, especially when someone tells me to stand up tall. I'll do that if I'm not careful. And that tilts the pelvis that way. And if you imagine the bucket of water, the water spilling over that front lip of the bucket. People who naturally do that, not so much the shoulder region, but down here, which is much less common, imagine the water pouring out of the back. So just take a moment as you stand to try and imagine that your pelvis is full to the brim like a bucket of water, and you should feel that you can feel a sense of not tension, but just readjusting of that to slightly tilt the pelvis forward like that, if you're like me. The other thing which is very important in your posture is to do with this, a rounding of the shoulders and the head going forward to I am looking at my phone kind of position. So we're going to do a couple of exercises which try and get that from here to here without causing that again. So let's try some. The first thing I want you to do is to stand up against the wall. Quite simple, but you'll notice hopefully as you stand against the wall, you'll feel certain parts of your body touch the wall, certain parts don't. Don't overly try and make everything touch, but you should feel your shoulder blades are slightly more together. And you should feel, once you're sort of nicely aligned with the wall, that if you take a small step forward, that you should feel your body is nicely upright. So try that exercise. What you want to avoid is this sense of walking away from the wall like that, back into this posture. Try and imagine, if you can, that the wall is still attached as you come away from the wall. And you should feel it's natural, it doesn't feel tense or held, but it is upright. This next exercise is a great one for trying to get your spine in the right position before you start to sing. It's very good for the neck, and it's also very good for keeping that nice upright feeling whilst also preserving a nice angle to the pelvis. And for this, I'm going to use a very important visual aid. It's my daughter's unicorn bracelet. Allow me to explain. So what I want you to imagine is that this central bit is your spine, and we are going to try and roll it up. Ignore the cracking, both in your own spine and in my visual aid. So it's that feeling of letting the neck come up at the last minute, and the head pops up like that. Let's try it in real life. So let me show you. You don't need to have to bend right over and touch your toes. I can't do that at the moment because, like a lot of you in this lockdown, I've tried to exercise a lot and do a lot of DIY and have therefore hurt my back. So I'll bend over as comfortable as I can. The main thing is letting the shoulders go and letting your neck and shoulders feel very floppy. And then right from here, you're going to try and uncurl the spine upwards. Really take your time and don't rush it. Don't let the head come up too early, so the shoulder back, and then you gradually feel the neck coming up. And then you're in this nice open posture position. The chest is up, but it doesn't feel held. And also, because of this feeling of having curled forwards, the pelvis should feel like it's got a nice level tilt to it. Some singers talk in terms of having the chest like a sort of noble posture. The idea that it's upright without standing to attention. Sort of walking around like you own the place is the kind of feeling you want. Very nice and upright, but also not turning into a very sway back, which tilts like that. So don't think standing to attention. Think noble from the sternum. A quick word about posture for those of you who find yourself singing on stage a lot. Obviously, during a show, a director will want you to move. They will want you to perhaps sit down or stand up suddenly or run and grab someone or run away from someone. How do you do all of these things, giving a natural performance without compromising the mechanics of your singing? Well, first of all, I would say it's your responsibility. The directors will mostly know what is and isn't possible for a singer, but you know yourself the best. So when you've worked on this spinal alignment, you need to make sure that you cheat your actions in such a way that this is not compromised. So not like this, not stretching back too much as well, making sure that alignment is good. Because if you don't, you are messing around with the things that supply your sound, which we're going to talk about now. I'm a latecomer to singing, and I initially trained as a trumpeter. And I'm going to use an analogy now, which I think is helpful for what we're going to talk about next. Imagine, if you will, a fairly good trumpeter who is trying to make themselves sound better by always buying different trumpets. Every gig, new trumpet, new mouthpiece, heavier valve caps, all that kind of thing. When actually the problem is that they need to deal with themselves physically, how they're using the breath up here to here and the buzzing of the lips before they worry about what trumpet they have. Then imagine a very good trumpeter who is very well set up here in terms of the physicality of playing. And when they buy a new trumpet or a new mouthpiece, what they're trying to do is to adjust what they have to the benefit of, or to make the most of, what is already being created. So we're going to talk about that because singers, I think, often can tinker around here and here to try and get the best sound they can, rather than talking about what is generating the sound much lower down. I've found that there seems to be quite a lot of confusion when it comes to talking about ideas of support and the low generation of the sound. Of course, we know the air goes into the lungs, but somehow we have this sense that the muscles below there are heavily involved in making a good sound, but they're muscles which we don't always have individual control over. So you use a lot of analogy and in an attempt to explain these things which are actually very difficult to control individually. I'm just going to try and do a few exercises with you that I have found helpful with the idea of connecting right to the pelvis and the pelvic floor region, because I've found that has made a huge difference to my ability to not only generate a sound which resonates, but also generate a sound which feels like it's my own sound, not one that I'm copying. So let's try the first exercise now. What I want you to do is to do this just to get a sensation of the low muscles being involved. We're just going to breathe in, a nice slow breath, and then breathe out. And then after we've done that, with just the dregs of what's left in your lungs, we're going to try and sing a bit. So I'll do it once, and then you copy. Just something like that, a little note. So you're going to breathe in, ready, this time with me. Get rid of all the air, get rid of it all, good. And then, and that feeling of just squeezing out the dregs of what's left in your lung should have been a nice low feeling. It shouldn't have felt like a collapsing up here, because we've got our nice upright posture, but there should have been a connection below the belly button to help those last dregs of air get out. So that's the first exercise. This next exercise is another one to do with trying to get the sensation of low engagement in the generation of the sound. Imagine for a moment that this is your pelvis. The pelvic floor muscles are literally the muscles on the floor of the pelvis where there's no bone. Imagine a sheet of muscle underneath there. So let's go with that as a rough analogy of what's going on down there in terms of the musculature. What I would like you to do is to find yourself in this nice upright posture again. And then just slightly let your knees soften, legs a bit further apart, and go into a more Neanderthal kind of posture like this. So what I want you to imagine, I've tweaked this analogy slightly for family audiences. Imagine a bowling ball on the floor in between your feet, maybe slightly further forward than your feet, and it is connected by a piece of sturdy rope to your pelvic floor muscles, or the bottom of your bucket of water, if you will. What I want you to imagine is that as you try and sing, even as you try and speak, that you are taking the strain on that rope which is attached to the bowling ball. Like I say, these are muscles over which we don't have easy individual control. So the use of an analogy is often the way that unlocks it for people. Certainly did for me. So what I want you to do, don't sing phrases, just try and sing a major third. Ah, 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 ah. Something like that. Ah, ah. And I just want you to have this clear picture in your mind of this weight on the floor that you are trying to not hoik up or anything. It's not as aggressive a muscle response as that, but is this just this sense of connection through the spine, right down low, ah, ah, instead of just ah, ah, ah. Does that make sense? Try. Now, I am not one of those singers who tends to walk around the room talking like this the whole time. And as a result of that, I think a lot of my warm-up is to do with getting out of the habits of everyday life and getting into a space where I feel like I can access the natural resonance of the voice that you find when you align the spine and try and access that low support. And that's the point, I think, is that resonance is something that we all can do naturally. So, for example, when a teacher speaks to one child in a class like this, I'm very disappointed in you, Tarquin. They are talking at this level, but if they need to speak to a whole year group in an assembly, for example, they'll naturally resonate like this, and their voice will be more projected. They're not shouting at all, and they could do that all day without their voice getting tired. But if I come to you now and I carry on speaking in that way, you'll notice it's much more resonant and unnecessarily so. But as singers, we can tap into our natural resonance as opposed to forcing it here. I think it's very important to continually access this sense of a low support as you go towards the high end of your range. I think for many years I didn't really get that, and I was nervous of going in my chest voice, and worried about that weight that basses can often carry to the top of their range, when ideally you want to go for chest voice, for head voice, very ringy here, no sense of ringiness here. But what I did incorrectly was I lost that sense of connecting to that low down feeling. And you can have your cake and eat it in that regard, I believe. So you don't sound like la 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 and then la la la. You can have a consistent tone. So taking this as an example, let's say trying to get that nice low connection. And then as I start to feel like I'm going into head voice, this feeling is one of getting out the way and allowing it into head voice, not manufacturing head voice with some kind of soft palate manipulation or something like that. If you connect to that sense of down here, you should find that it is a freeing exercise as opposed to a funneling and a tightening exercise. It's worth talking briefly about how expressive singing fits into this idea of a core to your sound that you don't compromise on. There was a great example of this in Giulio Cesare, where I was told to really shout a bit of recit right before quite a difficult and quite high aria, especially high for me as a bass, definitely. And James Conway, the director, really wanted like that, really sort of shouted and spat out, sort of saying, you stay there. And then, of course, the director wants like that. The conductor, Jonathan Peter Kenny, wants B flat, G, F, E natural, or whatever the notes were. And I had to take responsibility as a singer, like, how do I make sure that I can give them what they want whilst making sure that in 8 bars time I can still sing properly. So what I would say is, if your technique is here, and this is this core of your sound which you warm up on and you practice with, you can stray from it to get, say, a sobbier sound or a breathier sound, if that's what the music calls for, and even a brighter sound like that, or whatever you need. But you never stray too far from your core, and you are always careful not to get stuck with a sense of a characterization which isn't your true sound. That's really hard to do, but you must trust that your physicality will give you the sound which you can rely on. So that's it. That's the end of my little lesson with you. I hope you found something that I said interesting or useful. I'm happy to say the next lesson is going to be provided by the wonderful tenor Tom Elwin, who's a great communicator and a really thoughtful guy about singing technique. So he'll really put you through your paces, I'm sure. And I must leave him and you a little bit of homework. My main bit of homework is something I want you to do all the time, every day. And that is to just be mindful of your posture, especially if you know it's something you need to work at. Every so often, why don't you stand up against a wall so that your back just reminds itself of what it feels like to be straight? Why don't you in the mornings do one of those back rolls, you remember, just to get your back nice and straight so the chest is up but nice and relaxed? And when you're singing, why don't you just check in every so often and make sure that your posture is good? And the other exercise I'd like you to try is that feeling of getting yourself forward with your legs apart into that Neanderthal posture, and imagine you're lifting that weight just so you can get a sense of what the low muscles that support your voice are, and see if you notice a difference in your singing. Remember, just an engagement of those muscles as opposed to a forcing of those muscles is what we're after. We're so sorry that we can't be performing our shows to you. It was what we planned for all along, what we rehearsed so hard for. If you can, please do follow all of the great stuff that English Touring Opera is doing at the moment online. You can go to englishtouringopera.org.uk and follow their excellent social media accounts as well. We will see you soon. It might not feel like it at the moment, but we will see you soon. So until then, look after yourselves and take care. Cheers, bye.